Hey, this is Aaron Price, the CEO of TechUnited New Jersey, back for an Ask Member Anything today. Excited to welcome Steve Cummings, the VP of Marketing at Opengear. Steve, thanks for joining us.
Hi, Aaron. Nice to be part of this.
Where are you joining us from today physically? Where are you actually set up?
So I am in lovely Branchburg, just outside Bridgewater.
Nice.
Our company is based in Edison, but as you can guess, not too much is going on at our office right now.
Unfortunately not. Where is that lovely photo above your head from, or canvas?
So that is Arches National Park in Utah. I was out there a few years ago, and it's just a hobby of mine to take nice pictures wherever I'm lucky enough to be.
That looks very nice. Maybe we might need to do a follow-up on photography. Nicely done.
So I tell everybody as well, this is not a fake bookcase. There are actually books.
This is a real step and repeat, although most of my background is on tend to be fake. So can you tell people what is Opengear for those who are unaware?
Sure. So Opengear is all about network resilience, and our goal is really to help companies keep their network up and running, right? So IT over the last few years has gotten a lot more complicated. It used to be companies had one room where all of their servers were. Then they moved it out to data centers that were sort of dedicated places for it. Now, every facility that a company runs is effectively some kind of a mini data center, right? Whether it's a retail store, or an office branch, a bank branch, any location that a company owns, they have some kind of network equipment there. And so they no longer have, a trained engineer looking after every piece of equipment. So what we provide to them is a way to access that equipment remotely. So we sell things like this, which they put at every one of their locations, and it lets them tap into it remotely. So rather than having a network engineer at every one of their stores, they can have a room of people somewhere in the world that are able to go in and access it and make sure everything's up and running.
And is that a room of people? Are those open? Is that an Opengear service that they outsource that, or is the intention that it's their own employees that manage things remotely?
Yeah, it's their own employees. Our service is more about just keeping our equipment up and running. There are a lot of companies out there called MSPs that would be our customers, and then they would provide that kind of service to some of their customers.
Can you share some examples of the kinds of clients that you typically sell into?
Sure. The simple thing is anybody with IT services could be a client of ours. Where we've been particularly strong is things like retail. So, you can imagine there's an immediate cost to a company if suddenly they can't open the doors to one of their stores because the registers or the point of service equipment isn't working, right? So they have to shut down. They can't take people's money. It used to be there was an old-fashioned register. Now some of these you go in and it's an iPad or whatever, and they scan your credit card right there. If their network's not running, they're not taking money, and people are going to the store next door. So that's a big one. Financial companies, because a lot of it's about security and always having that access to it. And then entertainment companies, people like, one that people like talking about is NFL films. So one of our boxes is in every one of the football stadiums, because NFL films want to make sure that when they're doing recordings at a stadium, they're guaranteed that they can get that feedback to the main office. So anywhere where it's sort of a high cost if the network is unavailable even for a couple of minutes.
And so how does the product work? How does it make sure it can guarantee network availability?
Yeah, so we talk about two things. It's presence and proximity, right? So presence meaning one of our boxes is in every rack. Every place somebody has a lot of network equipment set up, our box is sitting at the top of it. And then proximity is it's physically connected to every one of those pieces of equipment. So one of the things that happens quite frequently, probably the biggest use of it is, and we all have this at home, right? Your network router just hangs up, or your cable box just stops working. And what do you have to do? You have to unplug the thing or turn it off, and you turn it back on again, and miraculously it works. So with our boxes, or without our box, you would have to physically send somebody to that location to literally turn it off and turn it back on again. With our equipment, you can have somebody sitting in a room 500 miles away, and they would effectively call our box through a cellular signal, tell the box, hey, you're connected to this router, just turn it off, turn it back on again, and hey, presto, majority of times, everything comes back and running again.
I'm a relatively technical person, but I've never actually looked into why does the restart magically work, and I wonder if you know the answer to that question.
Well, I'll admit I'm a chemical engineer, so I'm technical, but maybe not perfect for this. Basic idea is most things when they start up again, they run through a series of diagnostics and effectively reset themselves back to the beginning. And in most cases, it's just a case that it's got hung up on something, and it's basically taking it back to a startup status.
Yeah, that's a pretty good answer. I think that sounds right. Especially for an engineer. So tell me about the founding of the company. I know you've been there, I think you said for 4 years, right? How old is the company and how did it get started?
Yeah, so Opengear is 15 years old. It was started by a couple of serial entrepreneurs actually based in Brisbane, Australia. And they were tinkerers, and they had this idea that, as with most founders, right, they love disrupting stuff. So they had this idea of something that needed to be done. They built it. They realized that the market was primarily in the US for it. And strangely enough, even though we're based in New Jersey, our headquarters in New Jersey, our manufacturing is just outside of Salt Lake City in Utah. And so one of the first questions people ask is, why are you doing production in Utah? Well, Bob Waldy, who was the main founder, loves skiing. He wanted to be somewhere where he could ski regularly because Australia is not renowned for its ski resorts. So he picked Utah and figured, well, if he had a factory or facility in Utah, I'd have a reason to go there and ski. So, and that was, let's see, so they started the company 15 years ago. And we actually set up the headquarters in New Jersey about 5 years ago. So,
do you know how New Jersey became the corporate HQ?
Yeah, it's another one of those sort of quirky startup or small company stories.
So, like the best bagels in the country, something like that.
Well, right? So I'm from the UK, so I'm probably not the best one to talk about why New Jersey is the best place to do it. But so about 5 years ago, so Bob Waldy, who started it, he'd always sort of run small companies for fun. And actually, when I interviewed with him and I said, what's the 5-year plan, Bob? He said, I have no idea. I've never run a company this long. But about 5 years ago, they decided they were going to take it from something that had been bouncing around at about $1 million in revenue and really try and grow it and sell it. So to do that, you really can't run the company from Australia. So they decided to hire a CEO who had been in the industry for a long time. And they matched up with Gary Marks, who is New Jersey born and bred. And he said, yep, he would love to run. Well, the story he'll tell is he resisted and then eventually said, all right, I'll do it. But I'm not moving to Utah. We're going to set up an office in New Jersey. And so that's why Opengear now is officially a New Jersey company. And since then, so now we have marketing, we have product management, and a lot of the other sort of central, corporate activities in New Jersey.
Yeah. And what I think is so interesting is in the course of the time, you just talked about, right, the idea of the intention to grow, scale, and sell, which actually did occur just under a year ago. So tell me a little bit about that story. It sounds like you got there in this scaling period, and obviously you were part of the acquisition. But how did you go from about $1 million in revenue to significantly scaling?
Yeah, so Opengear, when I joined, had this almost fanatical following, right? And a lot of companies say they have fans, right? But I was amazed because people said to me, when you go to your first trade show, you will have people coming over and telling you that they love your product. And I thought, I've been doing this for 20 years. It's never happened. Sure enough, people would come up and say, I love your products. You know what? It really saved me because, something happened at 3 a.m. and, I woke up and I was able to use your thing and I didn't have to jump on a plane and go fix it. And then they would bring somebody over from another company and say, you should really be using Opengear stuff, right? So we had raving fans. Now, that's great when you're $1 million company, but how do you scale beyond that? So part of what we realized was, the people we were talking to were sort of at the coal face, as it were. They were the ones that were dealing with it. And so they would buy 1 or 2 or 5 units for their particular location. What we really need to do was to be selling to the larger companies or higher up in the company to say, okay, this works here, but you really need it across your whole organization. We were also helped by the fact that, there's been this big push into cloud computing and edge computing, and people putting more stuff, out to the edge. So people talk about the Internet of Things, and everything has sensors. So there's a lot more data. It means you've got to put all of that compute out to the edge, closer to where it's happening, which means you've got more remote locations, which means you need more Opengear boxes. So it was really two things. The market really drove it, but this realization that we can't be talking just to the network engineers. We need to be talking to the director of network, the CIO kind of level. And that was one of the reasons that I was brought in, because marketing till that point had been, as is typical in small companies, doing trade shows, doing a little bit of social media. And so the founders decided that, okay, part of this push is to really get our name out there, target different companies or different personas within those companies, and really push the Opengear brand.
It's worth pointing out that someone with a chemical engineering background is not often end up in the marketing function. How did that happen?
Yeah, it was a slow, painful process. So when I graduated as a chemical engineer, I worked for a couple of years as a design engineer, and I was sitting in front of a computer and I was doing calculations, and two things happened. One, I found it really boring, and two, I really wasn't that good at it. So fortunately, the company I was in at the time was a large company, and there was a lot of opportunities. So I moved into project management and then business development, which was really being the technical person going out on sales calls and backing up the salesperson, right? Telling them tech specs and all of that kind of stuff.
Telling them unplug it, plug it back in, and you're good to go.
Right, exactly. And so I realized I enjoyed that part of it. I enjoyed talking with salespeople. I enjoyed helping the sales function, dealing with customers. So then I got into a product marketing role. And so that process to get me into product marketing was about 5 or 6 years. And I did some marketing courses, and then gradually I've just sort of moved in. But it's always been technology products, right? So my first job in New Jersey was with MCore, which was a semiconductor company that was a spin-off from Bell Labs. So I've always worked with technology products. One of my first marketing mentors said to me, once you learn this stuff, Steve, you can go sell dog food. And I said, yeah, but who would want to sell dog food? That's just not interesting. It's like, for me, it's got to be a product that has some tech to it and is really interesting. So I've been doing this, I don't know, 20 years now, and then every time I get a new product, it's just something fun and interesting.
Where are you finding your best channels for this audience from a marketing perspective?
Yeah, as with everybody, events used to be big for us. Because our products plug into other people's products, a lot of our thing is an associative sell, right? Which everybody's familiar now with Amazon. Hey, because you buy this, you should buy this.
And can you share with people like the price point that we're talking about here for a unit?
Yeah, so the one that I showed here, this is about $1,000. Our most expensive ones go up to about $5,000 or $6,000.
Got it. And I ask because it's not exactly the easy, upsell price point where you just sort of, or is it? Maybe I'm wrong here.
Right, so it is. So as an example, one of the big companies that we plug into is Cisco, which I think everybody's heard of.
Sure.
So somebody may be spending a couple of $100,000 buying all of their equipment from Cisco, and our pitch is, well, if you're spending a couple of $100,000, put another couple of grand on top to make sure that you always have access to that Cisco equipment. So that we got a lot of our stuff from there, but we do a lot of digital. We spend a lot of money on good old Google ads. And I have Drew on my team spends pretty much his whole time just optimizing all of that. And we sell through channel partners as well. So we have sort of a third-party sales team out there pushing it for us. And I've been a big proponent of LinkedIn for the last couple of years. And Todd Rachecki, who's my VP of sales in the Americas, is right there with me. And Alan Stewart Brown, who's in the EMEA, is as well. So we put a lot of content out there. Our sales team then share that content. So we get this sort of network effect of our materials going out there. Our sales team come across as trusted advisors because they're sharing this industry material.
Yeah.
And the last couple of years, we've done a lot with PR where, we're trying to get articles published that aren't all about Opengear, but are about this idea of network resilience and always on access and all that good stuff.
We found that LinkedIn can be an effective but very expensive channel. And I'm curious, I love that we're talking about marketing for a very technical product, because often we're talking about things that are more consumer or more less technical B2B products. In this case, do you find that leveraging domain expertise is the best way to go? And do you think, you have a high enough average sale point where I'm assuming that the spend on something like LinkedIn maybe is easily justifiable, but have you found that also to be an effective or more expensive spend that we're seeing elsewhere?
Yeah, it's funny that you bring that up, because I have been a big proponent of LinkedIn for years. The one thing I'm not a proponent of right now is actually spending money on LinkedIn. So we did that for a while. But you're right, it's very expensive. And we track not just activity, but conversion. So a lot of our LinkedIn spend was download this white paper, sign up for a video, whatever it was. And we just weren't getting the conversions from it, which I do not understand, because their targeting is really good, right? We know their algorithms are great. But our spend on Google, and we do some on Facebook as well, is much more effective. So when I talk about LinkedIn, it's all the organic stuff, right? So we publish 1 or 2 posts a day on LinkedIn, and then we get our sales team to share it. A lot of our partners share it. So we find we get a lot of organic reach from it. What has surprised me is that actually Facebook, we do pretty well on the advertising, which, that was not intuitive to me. This is a very technical audience we're selling to, right? This is IT people, network engineers. Not that they wouldn't use Facebook, but when they're using Facebook, generally you think Facebook is about social stuff, right? So why would somebody, when they're on Facebook, think, oh, let me click through on this ad for a white paper about out-of-band management? Right? It just doesn't seem logical. And yet, we've been running this series of webinars that we started a couple of months ago, and our highest conversion rate is through ads that we're running on Facebook. So it just sort of shows that you can't assume these things. You have to get out there and spend the money and test it.
I totally agree with you on that. And by the way, this is streaming across multiple channels, including LinkedIn. Do you guys use LinkedIn Live?
No, this is my first LinkedIn Live experience, I guess.
Welcome to the party. I'm a big fan. I highly recommend it. StreamYard, the tool we're using here, is one of the few that lets you stream to multiple channels at once. But it's been very, very effective for us. We do find that the reach has been significant, and also I like the production quality of a tool like this. But for us, business organization, we found that we're getting significant reach, not as much during the lives as I was expecting, but the replay rate and the reach after it airs that's the part that's been the most interesting and surprising, and it's definitely helped reinforce the it's not for us not a direct sale point, but the reinforcing that another branding touch point in the sort of road to 5 to 7 you need to make a sale. That someone says, oh yeah, I've seen you've done all these things, where they may or may not be engaging, but we're getting the brand out there. It's been very, very effective for us. How has the pandemic affected your business? It seems like this is the reason, in many ways. You can make the justification that this is a key use case for why the product is so important.
For sure, yeah. I mean, there's the 2 parts here, right? So obviously, it's affected us the same as it's affected everybody else. We're all working remotely. Our manufacturing team in Utah has split into 2 shifts. Everything's sort of kept separate. COVID testing every day, all of that good stuff. And for our sales team, it's tough because they are used to, they're road warriors. They're out there, they're meeting with customers. And with our product, for us to sell it, our customers need to plug it into their lab and play around with it, and they don't always have access to it. So it has been a challenge from that perspective. The opportunity for us is, exactly as you were saying, because it's a remote access product, a lot of companies have sort of woken up and said, well, hang on, it's a lot tougher for me now to get somebody to go to those sites, right? So we always talk about a truck roll, this idea of when something breaks, somebody has to jump in their truck, drive to the location, and turn it off and turn it on again, or whatever it may be that's required. But the reality is, in a lot of cases, it's not a truck roll, it's a flight. One of our customers is the Port of Seattle. And I was talking to one of the engineers there, and he said, oh, it's not a truck roll. He says, I have to get on a plane and fly up over the Rockies into Canada to get to our location.
Yeah.
Well, you're not doing that in a pandemic. So, and particularly in Europe, where, you've got cross-country borders and what have you. So maybe you can fly domestically, but over the border is tough. So where it's helping us is people are saying, okay, we need an Opengear box in every one of our locations, because we can't guarantee that we can get somebody to that location. And there's these companies called co-location, people like Digital Realty, Equinix, that effectively host the equipment for people. And Equinix in Europe at the beginning of the pandemic said, we're not letting any of our customers have access to their equipment. We're just shutting it down.
Wow.
So, and of course, you could pay Equinix to then go in and do whatever you needed to do it. So this whole idea of, always on remote access is just absolutely increased in value. So, I mean, we're lucky that, we're still hitting, we're hitting our sales targets. The numbers are going up. So, I hate to say this during a pandemic, but for us, there has at least been an upside there.
Well, I mean, we've seen obviously in many instances, the tech industry has been primed to take advantage of the what's going on in the world, and obviously neither of us is hoping that the pandemic continues. But it's interesting to see which business models are thriving and where others are struggling. You talked about retail clients. Has this given some of them? Has this helped some of their scenarios, or is it until they can deal with the reality of just opening their doors? This is not even on their minds.
Yeah, so it's sort of a double-edged sword, right? They all realize now, or a lot more realize that they need it. Two parts to it. One is they probably don't want to invest the money at the moment, right? I'm sure they're all cutting back on it. The other thing that is always an issue with retail customers, when they get to Q4, they lock everything down because traditionally that's their biggest revenue quarter. They don't want to mess with anything. So typically we find the retail for us sort of dries up Q4, but then come Q1, everything that they wanted to do in Q4 picks up again. And I think part of it is, a lot of them are moving to e-commerce. So that means they have bigger data centers, which helps us. There's a lot more, they're talking about the delivery apocalypse over Christmas, right? That everybody's ordering online and can't get it. Well, so that's distribution networks for us, right? It's warehousing. So it's sort of one of the advantages we have that anybody who needs any kind of data needs an Opengear box. So it may not be your traditional retail, but the e-commerce stuff, the warehousing, the distribution is big for us now.
All the retail enablement technology.
Right.
I don't know if this is a dumb question, but why doesn't Cisco build this into their boxes? Why is this extra piece needed? It seems like you said, right, the price point here and what sounds like a very obvious pain point and necessary pain point. It's very understandable why this product is needed and not my strong suit, but why isn't this already built in?
I think it's a great question because that was the question I asked when I was interviewed at Opengear. It's like, well, hey, why doesn't Cisco just do it? So the short answer is they do. They just don't do it very well. And the reason they don't do it very well is it's not a focus for them, right? So, using my example from before, if you're selling $200,000 worth of equipment and you have an advantage to add $1,000 to that, you're not going to invest a lot of time and resources into it. So their products they can do what we do, plus they do a bunch of other things, but they're not investing the R&D in it. So they sell a lot of it because people will go in and say, all right, give me everything you got. I want everything from Cisco.
Yeah.
But then often what happens is then they start using it and they say, well, actually, I need it to be able to do this, or I wish you could do that. So then they look around for other things. So Cisco is one of these interesting things where theoretically we're a competitor to them, but we're actually one of their preferred partners because they realize that people using our equipment actually make the rest of their equipment more effective. So it sort of works. It works out fine for them.
Love businesses like this. Tell me a little bit about the sales process. You went out to raise some capital, turned into an acquisition. How did that unfold, and how's the marriage been? Yeah,
so it's the fourth time I've been acquired. So and everyone is a little different. This was an interesting one. So Digi International purchased us in December of last year. They're based out of Minnesota. And they have a very small part of their business overlaps with us, but they tend to do more embedded technology. So whereas our boxes sort of go into, data center or whatever, a lot of their equipment is included in other people's products, right? So, sensors for transportation, that kind of thing. So as is sort of a complementary business to it. And, they bought up, well, I don't know exactly why they bought us, but my suspicion why they bought us is it expanded their universe, right? So it wasn't just sort of an add-on of, okay, we'll go take market share from there. It was, hey, that's an interesting piece of business that we want to get into. And it's been an interesting process. They've effectively set us up as a standalone unit. Gary Marks, our CEO, reports to the CEO of Digi. And they pretty much left us alone, which has been nice. Things like finance and HR have been pulled in together, but sales team is completely separate. Marketing is separate. We've kept our logo and our branding and all of that good stuff. So I think what they're really trying to do is get the benefit of the strength of the Opengear brand. And Digi's an acquisitive company. They have bought, I don't even know, 15 plus companies. So they're used to bringing companies in, but they tend to be smaller organizations that they eventually bring into the fold. And at the moment, it seems as though, their theory is, let us do our thing. And of course, now we have the funding from them to do bigger and better things. We have a big engineering team actually in Australia doing R&D for us. We have an engineering team in Utah as well. And a lot of what we're focusing on is sort of the next generation. We're in this very small category without getting too technical. We're in this small category called out-of-band management, which we have probably 50% plus market share in. We all know once you get a 50% market share, even Coca-Cola struggles to get beyond 50%, right? So we've got to get into new markets. So a large part of what we're doing now under sort of Digi's wing is expanding that market and developing some new products that help us do that.
Got it. That's very interesting. How has your participation been? I don't know if you've paid much attention, but with the New Jersey Tech Council and now TechUnited New Jersey, how's your involvement been with this organization?
So I would say it's been intermittent. I've been going to Tech Council events for 10 plus years, but on and off. Never been an active participant, I guess. I've been a passive participant. I've been to some of the networking events and award events. I remember a really good one in Princeton a few years ago that was Innovation Awards. So I've always enjoyed going to the events. But I'm actually really interested by the whole, I guess because as a marketing guy, right? The whole rebrand to TechUnited, I think is very clever. The Propellify event is obviously a really good fit with it. What I've noticed recently, I think you're bringing in some really good quality speakers. So you're sort of broadening out, right? It's not this sort of insular, let's talk about what's happening in New Jersey, but I think you're trying to expand the overall view of it. One of I mentioned earlier, the first tech company I moved to in New Jersey was a company called MCore, and they were a spin-off from Bell Labs. It was a couple of scientists from Bell Labs. They were working on this technology, and it was like, let's go make a company. And I think it's a real shame now that the true Bell Labs, the original Bell Labs, doesn't exist anymore. So you lose a lot of that spin-off and the training and the experience of it. So I think things like TechUnited and BellWorks is really important for the whole New Jersey tech community.
Agreed. I'm glad to hear you're seeing some of the broader reach with speakers. What more, and any constructive criticism is welcome. What could we do to better serve the community? To even specifically Opengear. We're especially because this industry, frankly, IT in general, there's a lot. Many of our members are in this space. It's not a strength of our team. And I'd love to make sure we're providing the best value to this industry that we could. What sorts of things would you recommend we think about doing to make sure we're serving the IT space appropriately? Or are we doing it? I doubt we are, but either response is good.
Yeah, hopefully I'm not throwing anyone under the bus here. I remember a couple of years ago, I went to and I can't remember what it was, an advisory board or a steering committee for IT. And there was 25 people sitting around a table, and the conversation didn't go anywhere, right? That was one of my intermittent attempts to get involved, and I came away thinking, nothing's going to come out of this. So I wonder if it's more a case of very targeted. I think the idea of that was to be inclusive, and anyone who was with an IT company could come into this advisory. Maybe there's a way to pick, I don't know, half a dozen people as some kind of a steering committee to say, okay, what is it that we can do for IT? Because you're right, there are a lot of IT companies. I'm always surprised when I go to these events who you run into. And I know you do, certain events for CEOs and CFOs, but maybe you can do that with some of the industry verticals as well. Maybe there's an IT one and a fintech one and a few of those things. I think that would be really useful.
All right, that's great feedback. I will reach back out to you perhaps about rejoining that.
Yeah, I'd be happy to.
We want to know these things and make sure we're doing the most that we can. For people who are watching and want to know what they could do to help you, to help Opengear, what's something that this is a give and get community. What's something that people could do to help you out?
I figured I'd be prepared for any question you threw at me, Aaron, and that one, I'm not sure I do. So let me answer it with a completely different question. I guess I've been watching too many politicians the last few months, but so another thing that I think was really good that TechUnited kicked off was the mentoring program, and I put my name in for that, and hopefully at some point, I'll get picked out for that. But I would actually turn it around. I would say honestly, I think Opengear is in pretty good shape in terms of help that we get from New Jersey. But if there's anybody out there that does want any help, just from me personally, I love marketing and talking about tech marketing and B2B marketing. So I'm always happy to talk to people about that stuff. So you can find me on LinkedIn, obviously, and I'd be happy to talk to anybody about technology marketing. It's a fun thing. Hence all the books. They're all about tech marketing.
Awesome. It's a great representation of the community when I ask you, how can we help you? And you say, well, let me turn it around and see what I can do to help other people. I really appreciate that. I think that there's a lot of that going on in the TechUnited New Jersey community, and we appreciate that. Would like to speak to you more about what we can do with the IT group.
Sure.
And appreciate you putting your hat in the ring for the mentors. We were a little oversubscribed, which is great. We'll be doing more classes or cohorts next year, and hopefully we'll be able to include you in some of those.
Perfect.
So I really appreciate you spending time with us. I've learned a lot. I didn't know as much about Opengear as I would have liked. I certainly do now, and that chance you and I had a chance to speak. We're still have a few more big things coming to the end of the year, including our Gala, which is really more of a show this year, airing on December 9th. So hopefully we'll see you there. If you had any time to spend at Propelify, or even in most of the events since, we end with our signature move, which is the virtual high five. So on the count of three, you high five the camera. 1, 2, 3, boom. Steve, really appreciate you spending time with us today. Great to hear the Opengear story and your story as well. And hopefully we'll see more of some of these things virtually and maybe even in person in the near future.
Yeah, it's been nice talking to you. Thanks very much, Aaron.
Thanks a lot. Take care. Bye-bye.
See ya.